Hello, impromptu mini training time. It's to do with my battle cry, which is your prices are too low, put your prices up, which is what I say to 99% of my clients. I should explain that I have an uncanny and intuitive knack to be able to look at someone's pricing and tell them whether or not they are 3, 4, 5 times underpriced. And then reverse engineer it and prove to myself that I'm right. This is how I know that my intuitive knack is spot on. And I'm just going to cover it because it's very impromptu, because it's come up again, and it comes up. Honestly, it comes up with every single client. So I wanted to actually explain that and give you some practical examples to work through to show you why various costing and pricing models do or don't work. And obviously there is a difference between costing and pricing. And lots of people price according to what they feel is good. They price intuitively. But if you don't do the underpinning costing work, you don't know whether or not your price is actually covering your costs. And therefore you don't know. Hey. Thank you. Therefore, you don't know whether or not you're subsidising your business. And there's absolutely no way you should be subsidising your business, because your business is here to actually support you and support your development. So I'm just going to work through a few examples. I can't cover all the bases, but I'm going to work through some basic examples. And I'm going to share my screen in a second and go through a spreadsheet that I've created. And if you're on my list, I'm going to put that spreadsheet up for you to be able to go and download and work with yourself. Particularly useful if you don't like doing spreadsheets and you don't like to mess about with formulas. So I'm just going to share my screen now and take you through some various models. I always forget to press the share screen button. Right, so costing and pricing. So see, there is a difference between your costing and your pricing. So what I'm going to take you through is your costing and how to do various costing models. Now, the most common costing model that and the one that causes the most problems is the trading hours of time model, using an hourly rate. And I want to show you why that is a problem and how you need to work with it. But at the same time, even if you don't use this model to do your pricing, it is a valuable tool to do your costing so that you know whether or not your pricing is in the right ballpark. So I'm going to take you through, we'll do eventually, is some various models. Now, typically when I start with a client, I say, oh, how many clients are you going to work with? And they'll say, oh, well, I reckon I can do 8 client calls a day. And I go, right, okay, so, and you're planning on doing that for 5 days a week. So that's 40 odd hours a week spent doing naught but client calls. Now, there are a number of problems with that, and I'm going to explain some of those to you. One of the biggest problems, which I'm not going to cover here, but is something to very much to bear in mind, is that spending 8 hours, let's say for the sake of argument, a day sitting in front of your computer, talking to your computer, is not good for you. So it's not a good model. But let's just work on this basis. This is our first model. So let's say you're going to work 40 hours a week, and you reckon you're going to do 40 hours of client income generating work. You've instantly got a problem, because you need to save at least 40 to 50%, don't do that, 40 to 50% of your time to do your basic, stop it, sorry, that's my mouse messing about, 40 to 50% of your time available to do your business admin and also to do your marketing work. Now, you can choose to cut back on that, but then you won't have the clients in order to fill those hours. So let's just say that this is the model that you have. So you're going to work 40 hours a week. You're going to spend 40 hours of it on income generating work, i.e. with client facing, and you're going to, but then you still need another 20 hours a week. So this is stuff that you're going to have to make up out of that time. Now, let's say that you charge £20, $20, whatever you want to say, an hour to do that. Your total weekly income, your ceiling of income, is 800. Now, and then the next stage is, well, how many weeks of the year are you going to work? So you might say, oh, I'm going to let myself have 4 weeks holiday. Fine. So that's 48 weeks of the year. So just ignore some of those calculations that have come up. So your annual gross income, this is your gross income, the ceiling, the absolute maximum you can earn using this model is 38,400. Now, you're going to have some fixed overheads. Now, for the sake of argument, I've assumed there might be some office-based costs as well as any other costs. And we are not talking about where you need to be at in order to have a VA or any other business support in place, let alone accountants and all the rest of it. So I've just put in a calculation of 30% for fixed overheads, which I think is in many cases is quite conservative. So that gives you a taxable, taxable annual income of 26,880. That's taxable. Now, that model has you working flat out all year round for not very much. So one of the things I say to my clients all the time is really you have to model your business using a much more conservative framework for the client-facing work that you do. So let's say that you're still going to work 40 hours a week, but in this instance, you're actually only going to spend 20 hours of that time, 50% of it, doing client-facing work, which gives you 20 hours still available to do promotional work, whether or not that might be going off and doing keynote speeches, it might be spending time preparing Facebook posts or blogging or whatever it might be. These are other activities that you need to build in. And you're still going to charge $20 an hour for it. And here's the thing, in terms of the annual weeks you're going to work, to say you're going to work 48 weeks in the year is really optimistic. It doesn't allow for any sort of like life to get in the way, any sickness to get in the way. And honestly, I did this, I spent years and years and years, all of this work actually, my ability to hone make sure all the costs are covered comes from many years working in charities and learning to cut my cloth according to what is the phrase? But you know what I mean. That we had fixed budgets and we had to work out what we could do within them. So many years doing it from a different perspective. And when I was doing those budgets, I always worked on the basis that there was a maximum 42 weeks in the year of work time. By the time you'd accounted for all the various different variations, whether that was training, time off to do, for life, sickness, all the rest of it. And I think when we are running our own business as well, then one of the beauties of that is our ability to say, I'm not doing anything today. Or I'm going to go off and spend some time with the kids, or I'm going to go off for a walk because it's a nice day. So I think it is really important to actually say that you are is to possibly overdo it, but be cautious in how you do it. But you can see that means that there's a substantial income drop. And in terms of both because the fixed overheads aren't going to change. So that is actually having quite a significant impact on the available income, taxable income. So this is why my battle cry is put your prices up, because actually you can see that that's not sufficient. It isn't sufficient really as a basis for a living wage, but also to invest in your business, invest in your personal development. There's no way that you can work this model to your advantage, because you've hit a maximum level. You cannot actually earn, more than this unless you put your prices up. Now, whilst my battle cry is put your prices up, that doesn't mean just put your prices up because you need to put your prices up. First of all, you have to value yourself appropriately, and a lot of people seriously undervalue their years of expertise, what it is that they're actually achieving for their clients. So that's one side of it, is being honest with yourself about what that value is. And the other thing is thinking, well, okay, if that doesn't feel good, or if you think that there's the market isn't going to tolerate that a price increase, then you need to actually sit and think about what extra value can I focus in on that is going to make it hit a market tolerance. So let's now say that you're still going to work 40 hours a week. Let's work this again. But in this instance, you're actually going to start charging, sorry, it's done that wrong. Hang on, I don't want to do that. So you've now got, but you're still working on the model of 20 hours client-facing work and 20 hours behind-the-scenes work. But you're going to change your hourly rate to 40. And you're still going to work 42 weeks a year. But can you see how much a difference that creates instantly? I know it's doubling it up, but already it's actually more than doubling the amount of taxable income that you have straight off the bat. But this is why the hourly rate model isn't serving a lot of people. But it's useful. This is a useful exercise to go through and say, okay, this is what I'm doing. Now, the other thing to bear in mind with this is that you're assuming that you can actually generate the business to have available the hours available for income generating work. You can actually fill them. Now, what happens if you have 3 or 4 weeks when you can't fill them, when you've only got 1 or 2 hours of work? That has a massive repercussion, which is why the hourly rate model for service-based industry in particular is not a great one. So now let's look at program costings. Now, one of the things that I have found absolutely consistently is that it's not, in all sorts of businesses, is that all of the costs are just not accounted for. And that if you don't account for all of the costs in terms of the preparation, you cannot know what the actual price should be. It doesn't matter if you're doing this intuitively or you're doing it any other way. So one of the things I do work with is actually using a cost per hour model to make sure that the costs are covered. So I'm going to, with this one, I'm actually going to give you an example, because I was going to do, I'm going to do it roughly, but I was going to do I wanted to do a group program, and it was a small group program. I wanted a maximum of 3 people on there, and I wanted to include some one-to-one time and some follow-up time. So I had a very specific model that I wanted to follow. I also had in my head a very specific price, because I felt that was appropriate for the people that I wanted to bring onto it. And no matter which way I swung it, I could not make the amount of time that I was going to have to put into it stack up to the cost that I wanted to provide it. So I had to shelve it. So I'm going to sort of give you a bit of an insight to that and work through this particular model with you. So, and this is something that you need to do and be honest about, because there's lots of times then when we are doing we're doing the preparation, we're sort of getting ready to something's coming forward for us, and we don't necessarily take into account that time. But when you are putting together a program, you have got research time, you've got sort of scoping time, you've got mapping and planning time, you've got to prepare the promotional activities, you've got to implement promotional activities, you've got to prepare program materials, you've got to deliver the program. That's all the time that you'll be doing face-to-face with the people that you're working with. Then any follow-up time that you might come up with, any technical, that might be technical, it might be following up on particular issues that have come up. And then there's the amount of time that you might be putting into support. Now, there's probably other things as well that might come up in different types of programs, but you get the general gist. So let's work this out on, I'll just put some figures, and we'll see how it comes out. So program research and scoping time, you probably spend minimum, I wish you'd stop doing that, it's really irritating me. You probably spend a minimum of 5 hours doing that. Mapping it out and planning it, you're going to spend probably another 5 hours doing that. To prep all your promotional activities, but if we're talking about landing pages, sales pages, email sequences, maybe you're doing a webinar or a masterclass or something, some activity, might be a challenge or anything, you might be doing a promotional activity to actually launch this program, then you're probably going to be spending about, depending on how fast you write, I mean, I would give myself 5 hours, but if you're not very confident with it, I would double that. Implementation of the promotional activities, that's going to take you, I mean, particularly if you're then doing something like a masterclass, that takes a long time. So you're going to probably, I'm going to go 7.5 because that just feels about right to me. Then you've got to prep all the program materials. Now, even if you are outsourcing this, there's a cost to it. So there's a bit down the bottom. So if you're outsourcing it, you can put that into your budget to resource it. If not, you would want to put it in here. So you're still going to have some time because it's coming out of your head. So preparation of program materials, I'd probably spend I'll put in 5, but I think it would be more than that. Delivery of the program, then obviously you know that how many hours of calls are you going to do, how long are they going to, how many calls are you going to do, how long are they going to last. So you sort of need a bit of paper to work all of this out. But let's say let's go with a 4-week program with 4 one-hour sessions. So you've got at least 4 hours there. And then you've probably got another 2 hours, I'm being quite conservative here, and of follow-up time. And then probably you have got, I would say, somewhere in the region of about 3 hours of support time. So I didn't sum that. So let's just see how many, that's 36.5 hours of your time. Now, let's say you are working on the basis that you are charging 40 an hour to do that. Your total cost at this point, your total development and implementation cost is about 1,400. Let's say now you want a resourcing budget and you need to outsource some of this work, or you want to get some stuff, I don't know, something printed, but let's just say that you give yourself a budget of 350 to do that. So your total cost then is 1,800-ish to actually develop it and implement it. So now you know what your bottom line is that you need to actually to cover in terms of those costs. Now, that doesn't include any profit, really. That is just your bottom line. So now let's say, in my instance, you've got 3 spaces available and you want to charge them at $397. Okay, you can already see, this is where I got into trouble, you see. You can already see that your total income is less than your total outlay. So what you can then do is say, okay, well, could I increase it to 4? This is where I got completely stuck, you see. I am roughly ballpark as to where I was. I'm still not actually covering my costs taking on 4. So if I take on 5, I just cover my costs. And so then I went back, in my instance, I went back and said, okay, let's do 3 and let's do it at $597. I'm still not covering my costs. So I thought, well, I didn't want to do this because I knew how much time, because it starts to increase the amount of time on delivery, because I actually, for every person, because I wanted to do one-to-one work with them, then that was actually increasing the cost. But you can see that I had to go to 4 at $597 to even get anywhere close to actually having a profit. This is so important because I see so many instances of programs coming out really, really, really fast. And that's and actually pre-qualifying them is great because you can do the preparation of the program while you're actually doing the sales of the program, which is a really good model to use. But unless you've done this background work and you've given yourself a time budget at the very least to work out how much time it's going to take to prep and deliver and follow up, then You can't know whether or not you are going to be, your intuitive pricing is anywhere near the mark. And in this instance, my intuitive pricing was saying $3.97 was the right price point for what I wanted to do. But as you can see, I could not make that anywhere close to stack up, which is why it's now, despite being a really good program, it's now shelved. So that's program costing, and this is why it is so important to, know your value. That is a separate conversation, really, on many levels, because I actually want you to really think about the practicalities of costing and pricing. So now let's have a look at some fixed price products. And I need to scroll it back up again. It's jumped down. Okay. So the process is not dissimilar, but how you allocate the costs is slightly different. So if you're offering a fixed price product, then you need to know how much it costs you to develop it. So I'm going to use, as an example, I'm going to use my element map as an example. And I will talk also about, the importance of doing this for freebies as well. But I'll come on to that. I'll work this through with, I can use my element map. So the product development time, I must have spent 15 hours working this up. Setting it out, mapping out what it was going to include, and working out how it was going to work. I probably spent another 10 hours doing that. Preparation of promotional activities, that wasn't too bad. I spent about 3 hours doing that. Implementation, I've probably done 5 or so. No, actually, sorry, now I'm not thinking it through straight. I've probably actually done 10, because I've done things like podcasts where it's come up. And the actual preparation of the product itself, another 5 hours of that. So I've spent, I'll just sum that because I haven't done the summing. So I've spent about 43 hours on it. Now, let's say for argument I charge £40 an hour, which I do not, and you'll see why, that it's cost me £1,700 to produce that so far. Now, actually, I haven't had to have a resourcing budget, but you can imagine if I was then outsourcing it, or I had graphics needs that I had to cover, then that would bump that up. Now, let's have a look at it. So my total product development cost is $1,720. Now, how long does it take to produce one of these? So in each individual one is at least not 105 hours. That would be a really bad idea. 1.5 hours minimum. So let's say I'm doing that at 40 an hour, which again is not what I charge, but I would charge. But so it costs me 60 for every single one that I do. Now, how do you then allocate that cost against something? Because once you've got it in place, how does that keep? How does the development time play out? So the best thing to do is think about, well, how long is it going to run for? So in the case of this, I'm just going to say that I reckon it will last for about 2 years, which is 104 weeks. And I've just done it so it's 24 months and 2 years. So I've just done this for the sake of ease of the calculations. So how many can I do a week? Now, I'm only going to allow myself to do about 2 a week because I need to be doing other work, which is about 8 a month, and she says 80, 80, 88, 96 a year. And they sell for 77. So I'm just going to put that in, and now I'm going to show you the calculations. Now, what I've done is I've allocated the development cost. Just stay put. I've allocated the development cost across the product lifetime. So if I am doing this is useful because now I can see how long I need to run it for and actually to recoup those costs that I need to do. You can see that just by doing 2 a week, it's certainly not going to recoup its costs very quickly, because My profit is on a weekly basis, just on a 1 week basis. Excuse me. Stop that. Is going to be, I'm getting nowhere close. I need to be running it for at least a year, really, to be actually to recoup those costs. So this is an important thing to be aware of. Now, if you are creating a free product, something that people can download or something people can attend, then this process is really important to go through, because you need to know how much it's cost you to produce something, so that you can work out how much you need to generate off the back of that freebie in order for it to have covered its costs. And I'm going to give you an example, because in the UK there's a well-known sales coach, and she held an event fairly recently at a fairly posh venue. And my jaw hit the floor when I saw how much she was charging for it, because she could easily have charged at least £1,000 for the day, because it wasn't just her. She brought online loads of experts. So there was all the costs associated with that would have been quite high, which she's only charging, so I think it was £90 for the day, which was, they're so low. And when I looked at that, I just went, okay, my intuitive take on it was that she was literally covering the cost of the venue hire. So why was she doing that? Well, she had a follow-up strategy. She knew that what was springboarding off the back of that event was going to generate, and I would say probably medium to long term, she knew was going to recoup its costs easily because of the value of what was coming after that. So as long as you have a strategy for having a free product, that's great. Equally, if you are doing a flash sale, bit of a bone of contention with me, but the flash sales, but I do see people offering things for insanely low prices, and amazingly there is no follow-up to it. Now, if you're doing that and you have no plan to recoup those costs, then you are again subsidizing your business. So if you're going to do something at a very low price point, know how many you need to sell, and know what you need to springboard off the back of it, and have a very solid follow-up plan in order to make sure that you can recoup your costs. Because every time that you spend, all the time that you spend developing something has to be recouped. It's not free time. Every minute that you are at work needs to be accounted for in order for you to have a viable business. So these are three different models, and they're not perfect, and they're pretty generic. Sorry, I do wish it wouldn't do that. I'm going to stop the share now. It's not perfect because it's got to be quite generic in order to be able to cover all of the bases. But it gives you an insight into the process that you want to do it. So when you are thinking about your costs, you've really got to think about absolutely all of them. Every single possible cost that you might have in terms of your overheads, in terms of your running costs, your time, all the time that you might spend on something that you may not actually think about, may not actually allocate. You may not think, oh, that's relevant. Every minute is relevant, because every minute that you don't allocate, it's like it snowballs. There's a bit here and there's a bit there, and it just keeps on going and going and going. And by the time you've actually lost maybe 5-6 hours a week, it's really, really easy to do. And one of the things that I find with my clients when I'm working with them is that they'll discover that they just do not have enough hours in the week by the time they've thought about how much they spend on all the different things, which is where you then need to be thinking very carefully about business models that you have, so that you can actually make the most of that time. But the key things here are, do not overestimate the amount of time you've got for client generating work, because you do not have as much time as that. So, when you're doing programs, even if you're not using an hourly model, you still need to think about how much time do you have left after you're running a program to service any one-to-one clients, or to do any follow-up work, any promotional work, any admin work, do your taxes, all of those things. have to be incorporated into your daily week. And if you're going to set yourself a very clear boundary about the number of hours that you want to work, and you don't want to run yourself ragged, because let's face it, we didn't get into doing this in order to run ourselves ragged. We got into doing this to have some freedom and some flexibility. So why would we want to be putting ourselves in a situation where we have to work 60, 70, 80 hours a week just to get everything done? That doesn't make any sense. So you don't want to hit a glass ceiling with your income. You need to have enough flexibility within your business model to be able to give you the ability to grow, not just by putting your prices up. Sometimes you want space to be able to bring in a different stream of activity. So what I've walked you through works for each individual thing, but you need to actually also work that through as a broad picture, all the different things that you've got that you're running. How many hours do you need to spend on those? What's the space that you've left yourself to develop anything else, deliver anything else? How much space have you left yourself for doing administrative work? How much space have you left for yourself for going out and generating more clients and more work? And how much time have you allowed yourself to look after yourself, which is a really, really important point. So when it comes to those modelings, these are all really important things to consider. And I don't think I've yet had a conversation with a client that didn't go along the lines of, oh yeah, that model's not going to work, is it? Because clients, it might be that I have a client who's really needs to be getting up and moving around a lot. And yet the model that they've set themselves up with means that they're sitting down all day. And have to be sitting down all day. If they're not doing discovery calls, that's another one that needs to be accounted for. You need to have the space to meet prospective clients. It was literally had filled in every minute of the day, either doing discovery calls or client calls, with no space to actually go and recruit those clients. So, it's really important to accurately and even conservatively estimate how much time you have available for doing that work, so that you have some contingency time, you have some freedom, and you have some flexibility to move things around. So one of the things I will say to you is that if this is, I have no idea how long it takes me to do this, a really good discipline to have for a little while at least, to give you that benchmark, is to time track. I use Toggle all the time, particularly when I'm doing something that I don't know. That sorry, I wasn't going on there. But if it's something that I haven't done before, or it's something that I haven't really paid attention to, and yet I am guilty of doing that, then I will stick on Toggle and just track the amount of time that I spend on it. So when I was doing the element map, I was making sure that I knew how long it was taking me, and I was tracking the amount of time that it takes me to do it. Don't need to do that now because I know how long they do take me. But then every time there's a new evolution in that, I need to go back and track it so that I do know exactly how much time I'm spending on it, and therefore whether or not I need to adjust my pricing. So costing, pricing, two different things. Very important to have the costing work done in order to be able to justify the pricing. So I hope that helps. Ask me any questions. And as I said, if you're on my list, you can get this worksheet. I will put it up on the Slack channel, so you can just go and download it and then put it to work in your business. Any questions? Let me know. And otherwise, happy pricing.